YouTube, welcome to my channel, Anna Bella, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Outsider, the much underrated and maligned Yakuza movie that stars Jared Leto on Netflix. Let's get to the review. First thing is this movie is set after 1945 when Japan has surrendered to the Americans. It's a period film, and I think that that's what threw a lot of people because they were expecting a modern day Yakuza movie. This is not a modern day one. It's set with individuals that are living in the late 1940s, early 1950s. We don't know exactly when, but we know that it's not exactly after the surrender, but around that, maybe 3, maybe 4 years after. So the attitudes of the American GIs are going to be slightly different, as are the attitudes of the Japanese people. It's a period piece, and I think that that's what threw a lot of people off because they were expecting a modern day film. This is not it. Another accusation is cultural appropriation again, saying, oh, it just feels like we're on tour. But if you were a 1940s GI coming to Japan, it would feel incredibly strange and different. You'd gone from America to Japan, so naturally people are going to want to see sumo wrestling, they're going to want to see geisha theatre or Japanese theatre, they're going to want to see people getting their fingers chopped off, because that's what happens in Yakuza Japanese criminal gangs, which is exactly very similar to the Godfather Italian mob series. We can have a series about that, but apparently we've already been inundated with too many Yakuza movies. Well, actually, I don't think we have, not period pieces, and that's quite important because in World War II in America, the New York mob made a deal with the USA government to protect the ports. And I think that that's important, that the mob actually did have a role during World War II and in the aftermath of World War II. And it didn't matter which mob it was, whether it was the Japanese Yakuza, the American mob, or the Italian Mafia. It really didn't matter. They had a role and they were actually doing a job. Most of them did have to make deals with the government to allow armaments to be freely available in various countries, to allow stuff to get through, to allow the black market, because remember, rationing was still happening in a lot of places, and I suspect Japan was heavily rationed as well. So with all this historical context, you can approach this film very differently. Also, there is the psychopath effect. When you play a psychopath, you're supposed to not show emotions. This can cause the uncanny valley effect, which is whenever somebody meets somebody who's not quite right, like when you meet those robots and you kind of get that feeling of unease, psychopaths are supposed to give you that. If Jared Leto in this film is making you uneasy, he's supposed to be doing that because he's a psychopath, because a psychopath can turn unpredictably violent at any moment. I know we're supposed to call it antisocial personality disorder now, and there's no such thing as a sociopath because they got rid of that and just go with antisocial personality disorder. Moving swiftly on from the diagnostic manual, because that's not what we're supposed to be talking about. I like this movie. It had a really subtle soundtrack. It had a good starting point. I think what people found difficult was a lot of what was said wasn't explicitly said. So for instance, when he goes to go and negotiate with this American guy on the docks who's doing a deal with the other Japanese Yakuza family, it takes him the whole of sort of minute to realise that the only way we're going to negotiate with this guy is if I injure him, and then he will pay our family money, because he becomes an enforcer. And I think for a lot of people, they're sort of like, what? He didn't even talk it out. Or in the question where his girlfriend asks him, do you know what your tattoo means? Do you know what your tattoo means? And she asks him twice, and you see a sort of like a light smile come, and then she starts explaining what it means. He didn't answer her question, but he knew that she was going to say it anyway. So it's the unspoken stuff. And when you're dealing with somebody who's very blank, as the character of Nick is, it makes it difficult for neurotypicals to be emotionally involved. But I think that's the point, because you aren't going to have the same emotional involvement in a movie that's set in the Yakuza, which is the Japanese gangster family. How they are very different. They're not as emotive as Americans. It's one of the reasons why I think Americans struggle when they come over to the UK and they think, why aren't you emoting? Because we're reserved and we just don't. I mean, I know that hugging has become more popular, annoyingly, but I mean, why do you want to go around hugging people? I've just come out of a pandemic. I don't want people to hug me. No, thank you. So it's understanding all of these cultural differences. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that people have struggled with this movie, because I think one of the things was they were like, well, how can? He's a white man, he can't play Yakuza. And I was like, have you actually read what this plot is? He's an American GI that's in jail that saves a Yakuza guy from hanging himself, who then gets sort of adopted by the Yakuza. It's set just after World War II, so there were Americans GIs in Japan. Once again, it's people assuming what the movie's going to be about before they've seen it. And this happens a lot now in our cancel culture. That is the only term I'm going to phrase this. People like to cancel something before they've even seen it, and it's not even based off what the movie actually is about. And that's quite worrying, because that means that people are shutting down conversations that they don't want to have before they've had them. That's scary and worrying, because I like to see something first and then make a judgment, because that's important. You should watch, you should hear that argument. Even if the argument is distasteful, you should still hear it, because there's got to be a reason why that argument is being put forward. And if you don't listen to it, then how on earth can you A, mount a suitable defence, and B, claim to be a person that is living? It's kind of worrying, really. Anyway, this film, I would give it a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed it. In fact, I think that they should have made The Outsider into a series, because it really does sort of merit a want a sequel, because I want to know what happens when Nick becomes the patriarch of this family. And I also think that what people weren't expecting was the respect of the two families, because the younger patriarch is dealing with an older patriarch who is the friend of his father, which is why he hasn't gone to kill him. The chap that is the true outsider that betrays everybody, Nick killing him benefits everybody, because why would you want to embrace somebody that had killed their own father? In Yakuza speak, I wouldn't. I want them to get rid of, you know, the first thing you accept them, and then the thing is like, well, that guy betrayed this guy, he's going to have no loyalty to me, he's going to come after me next. And it's all these things, it's thinking how they would think. And yes, it is different, and people did moan and groan. Anyway, I've done my review now. I'm giving it 4 out of 5. So there you go. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Netflix film The Outsider, starring Jared Leto. Please like, comment and subscribe, and stay safe wherever you are.